Okay, so tonight we're going to deal with the German mystic Hildegard von Bingen, who lived basically, as you'll see, from 1100 to 1180 or so. In Bingen is on the Rhine, and truly an amazing mystical person who, as you'll see, had visions of all kinds of things that she shared with the world. So what do you want to do? Do you want to play some of her?
Let's have a little more of her music. I think that was nice.
Yeah. So
among other things, she was a composer and arranger of music.
Yeah, she has the largest body of medieval music that anyone is aware of by far. And there's a lot of this on YouTube now that simply wasn't there 5 years ago. But it's a lot of it is what do we call this, monophonic? There's
I would have thought it was polyphonic, but what do
there's there's a lot of things where there simply is one voice, typically one woman,
right?
And they're singing, but not really words. Okay, they're just going up and down, and it's a very nice chant, but it's there wasn't anything else to compare this to. This came to her in visions. She decided to record this because she kept having these visions, and so it goes. So
well, she couldn't record it. You mean write it down?
I know.
Okay.
So let's see. I'm gonna get out of this thing here, and I'm gonna go back into the.
She was an abbess.
Here it is here.
And she ran abbeys that were like small factories. So, and she produced music and paintings, and she was a naturalist, an herbalist.
Yeah.
And she ran these abbeys, which were really like small factories.
Yeah.
There were like, I think 3 or 4 of them that she ran all together nearby.
So let's play this. Let's see.
Oh, by the way, I have to leave at 8:30. I have a birthday party to go to.
No problem. We'll finish by 8:30.
Okay.
Here we go. Oh, wait, I forgot to, hold on, I screwed up one thing. How do I get out of this? I forgot to hit the sound thing. No, I did hit it.
Yeah. You did that early on. So.
Okay, now how do we get this thing to play? Here we go. So this is an example. This is 4 minutes long, and it's a group of Russian teenagers. They're all women.
There's a male musician.
There's some here's the instrumentalist here. Okay, now we're going to go to the PowerPoint. So give us a second to find it. Here it is.
So she was doing that around the time that Chartres Cathedral was built.
Well, they were building it, but they hadn't.
Yeah.
Oops, hold on. I gotta go kill it. Hold on.
So we basically listen to some of it every day at this point, and I just really like it. I used to have some CDs and tapes, but they were very unusual. There were like 4 that were, available, and I guess I started listening in maybe the 90s. And now they just keep unearthing more and more and more. So that's she had paintings done. She didn't paint them herself, but she directed them. And there are a lot of them. And this is one, and this is showing her receiving a vision from above. It's thought nowadays that she had some kind of epilepsy.
But no one knows.
And that was part of what was going on for her. For quite some time, she suffered enormously. And it turned out it was because she was resisting the effort. She was exerting this enormous effort to keep herself from sharing her visions. And then she finally got direction from God that she should share them, that she should make them known. So she started to write them down and paint them. And I don't know if she was doing the music before, but she worked in, she did plays. She did morality plays that were really like small operas, small kind of Germanic operas. And
she was running 3 abbeys, right. 3 different abbeys, all clustered around the Rhine,
that were enormously productive. And it was unusual because they were co-ed at the time, and she was in charge. And that seemed to help alleviate some of her suffering. Was doing it. She lived into her 70s, I think.
Yeah,
and was very, very productive. So here we go.
This is just an introductory thing, just to show there are a number of mystics, women mystics in the Middle Ages. She was the one that people talk about a lot. So she was born in 1098 and lived till 1179. And we just have a little bit on Mechthild of Magdeburg. And then there's 2 others that come up, Hadwich of Antwerp and Catherine of Siena. But we're just going to really focus on Hildegard here.
So she lived from 1098 to 1179. She was a German noblewoman who had visions from a young age and entered a religious cloister at 15. She was a composer, visionary, and founder of the Benedictine community in Bingen. Hildegard's work includes a trilogy, an encyclopedia of medicine and natural science, and an enormous body of music. I don't know if they've even finished discovering it all or translating it all. The other is Mechthild of Magdeburg, a German bigwine who wrote 7 books of her autobiographical Flowing Light. They were both very preoccupied with light. Right. And Hadwich of Antwerp, a Flemish bigwine who wrote in Dutch. She believed that the soul longs to be one with divine love again. And then Catherine Siena, from 1347 to 1380, a significant figure in the late Middle Ages, who helped stimulate interest in a crusade to reform the Catholic Church.
So here we go.
So the life history of Hildegard, OSB, von Bingen, that means just from Bingen, that was the area of the Rhine. She was also known as the Sibyl of the Rhine, a German Benedictine abbess and polymath, active as a writer, composer, philosopher, mystic, visionary, and as a medical writer and practitioner during the High Middle Ages. She is one of the best known composers of sacred monophony, that's what they're calling it, the one note at a time, as well as the most recorded in modern history. She has been considered by a number of scholars to be the founder of scientific natural history in Germany. Hildegard's convent at Dissebodenberg elected her as Magistra, Mother Superior, in 1136. She founded the monasteries of Rupertsberg in 1150 and Eibingen in 1165. Hildegard wrote theological, botanical, and medicinal works, as well as letters, hymns, and antiphons for the liturgy. She wrote poems and supervised miniature illuminations in the Rupertsberg manuscript of her first work, Scivias. There are more surviving chants by Hildegard than by any other composer of the entire Middle Ages, and she is one of the few known composers to have written both the music and the words. One of her works, the Ordo Virtutum, is an early example of liturgical drama and probably the oldest surviving morality play. She is noted for the invention of a constructed language known as lingua ignota. Although the history of her formal canonization is complicated, regional calendars of the Catholic Church have listed her as a saint for centuries. On May 10, 2012, Pope Benedict XVI extended the liturgical cult of Hildegard to the entire Catholic Church in a process known as equivalent canonization. On the 7th of October 2012, he named her a doctor of the Church in recognition of her holiness of life and the originality of her teaching. Hildegard was born around 1098. Her parents were Mechtilde of Merxheim, Nahet, and Hildebert of Bermersheim, a family of the free lower nobility in the service of the Count Meningard of Sponheim. Sickly from birth, Hildegard is traditionally considered their youngest and 10th child, although there are records of only 7 older siblings. In her Vita, Hildegard states that from a very young age, she experienced visions.
Remember, they had these large families because so many of the kids died and before they even made it to adulthood from all these various pestilences and so forth. So,
from early childhood, long before she undertook her public mission or even her monastic vows, Hildegard's spiritual awareness was grounded in what she called the umbra viventis lucis, the reflection of the living light. Her letter to Gilbert from Gembloux, which she wrote at the age of 77, I've read part of that, describes her experience of this light. From my early childhood, before my bones, nerves, and veins were fully strengthened, I have always seen this vision in my soul, even to the present time when I am more than 70 years old. In this vision, my soul, as God would have it, rises up high into the vault of heaven and into the changing sky and spreads itself out among different peoples. although they are far away from me in distant lands and places. It's what ended up happening. And because I see them this way in my soul, I observe them in accord with the shifting of clouds and other created things. I do not hear them with my outward ears, nor do I perceive them by the thoughts of my own heart or by any combination of my five senses, but in my soul alone. All my outward eyes are open. So I have never fallen prey to ecstasy in the visions, but I see them wide awake, day and night, and I am constantly fettered by sickness and often in the grip of pain so intense that it threatens to kill me. But God has sustained me until now. The light which I see thus is not spatial, but it is far, far brighter than the cloud which rises from the sun. I can measure neither height nor length nor breadth in it, and I call it the reflection of the living light. And as the sun, the moon, and the stars appear in water, so writings, sermons, virtues, and certain human actions take form for me and gleam.
Oops, wait, you're gonna have to,
That was it.
you there?
Yep. Hildegard and Jutta, daughter of Count Stephan II of Sponheim, were enclosed together at
Dispodensberg.
at age 14 and formed the core of a growing community of women attached to the monastery of monks named Frauenklause, a type of female hermitage. Jutta was also a visionary and thus attracted many followers who came to visit her at the monastery. Hildegard states that Jutta taught her to read and write, but that she was unlearned and therefore incapable of teaching Hildegard sound biblical interpretation. The written record of the life of Jutta indicates that Hildegard probably assisted her in reciting the Psalms, working in the garden, other handiwork, and tending to the sick. This might have been a time when Hildegard learned how to play the 10-stringed psaltery. Volmar, a frequent visitor, may have taught Hildegard simple psalm notation. The time she studied music would have been in the beginning of the compositions she would later create. Upon Jutta's death in 1136, Hildegard was unanimously elected as the magistra of the community by her fellow nuns. Wouldn't that be sister nuns? Abbot Kuno of Diebodenberg asked Hildegard to be prioress, which would be under his authority. Hildegard, however, wanted more independence for herself and her nuns and asked Abbot Kuno to allow them to move to Rupertsberg. This was to be a move toward poverty from a stone complex that was well established to a temporary dwelling place. When the abbot declined Hildegard's proposition, she went over his head and received the approval of Archbishop Henry of Mainz. Abbot Kuno did not, what?
Mainz.
Mainz? Okay.
Yeah, the Z is Nazi, Mainz.
Okay. Abbot Kuno did not relent, however, until Hildegard was stricken by an illness that rendered her paralyzed and unable to move from her bed, an event that she attributed to God's unhappiness at her not following his orders to move her nuns to Rupertsberg. It was only when the abbot himself could not move Hildegard that he decided to grant the nuns their own monastery. Hildegard and approximately 20 nuns thus moved to St. Rupertsberg Monastery in 1150, where Volmar served as provost, as well as Hildegard's confessor and scribe. In 1165, Hildegard founded a second monastery for her nuns at Eibingen. Hildegard said that she first saw the shade of the living light at the age of 3. And by the age of 5, she began to understand that she was experiencing visions. She used the term visio, Latin for vision, to describe this feature of her experience. And she recognized that it was a gift that she could not explain to others. Hildegard explained that she saw all things in the light of God through the 5 senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. Hildegard was hesitant to share her visions, confiding only to Jutta, who in turn told Volmar, Hildegard's tutor and later secretary. Throughout her life, she continued to have many visions. And in 1141, at the age of 42, Hildegard received a vision she believed to be an instruction from God to write down that which you see and hear. Still hesitant to record her visions, Hildegard became physically ill. The illustrations recorded in the Book of Scivias were visions that Hildegard experienced, causing her great suffering and tribulations. In her first theological text, Scivias, they're translating as Know the Ways, Hildegard describes her struggle within. But I, though I saw and heard these things, refused to write for a long time through doubt and bad opinion, and the diversity of human words, not with stubbornness, but in the exercise of humility, until laid low by the scourge of God, I fell upon a bed of sickness. Then compelled at last by many illnesses, and by the witness of a certain noble maiden of good conduct, the nun Richardus von Stade, and of that man whom I had secretly sought and found, as mentioned above, I set my hand to the writing. While I was doing it, I sensed, as I mentioned before, the deep profundity of scriptural exposition. And raising myself from illness by the strength I received, I brought this work to a close, though just barely in 10 years. And I spoke and wrote these things not by the invention of my heart or that of any other person, but as by the secret mysteries of God I heard and received them in the heavenly places. And again I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, cry out therefore and write thus. Hildegard von Bingen, Scivias, translated by Columba Hart and Jane Bishop, 1990. It was between November 1147 and February 48 at the Synod in Trier that Pope Eugenius heard about Hildegard's writings. It was from this that she received papal approval to document her visions as revelations from the Holy Spirit, giving her instant credence. On 17th of September 1179, when Hildegard died, her sisters claimed they saw 2 streams of light and appear in the skies and cross over the room where she was dying. Hildegard's works include 3 great volumes of visionary theology, a variety of musical compositions for use in the liturgy, as well as the musical morality play Ordo Virtutum, one of the largest bodies of letters, nearly 400, to survive from the Middle Ages, addressed to correspondents ranging from popes to emperors to abbots and abbesses, and including records of many of the sermons she preached in the 1160s and 1170s. 2 volumes of material on natural medicine and cures, an invented language called Lingua Ignota, unknown language, and various minor works, including a gospel commentary and 2 works of hagiography. Several manuscripts of her works were produced during her lifetime, including the illustrated Rupertsberg manuscript of her first major work, Scivias, the Dendermonde Codex, which contains 1 vision of her musical works, and the Ghent manuscript, which was the first fair copy made for editing of her final theological work, the Liber Divinorum Operum. At the end of her life, and probably under her initial guidance, all of her works were edited and gathered into the single Risen Codex manuscript. The Risen Codex manuscript is a collection of 481 folios of vellum bounded by wooden boards, bound in pig leather, that measure 45 by 30 centimeters, 18 inches by 12 inches.
The recent codex, it means a giant codex. And so you can see if there's 481 of these, and they're each 18 by 12 inches by, who knows, 2-3 inches thick. 481 of them is, many hundreds of feet.
Well,
Hildegard's most significant works were her 3 volumes of visionary theology. Scivias, Know the Ways, composed 1142 to 51. Liber Vitae Meritorum, Book of Life's Merits, or Book of the Rewards of Life, composed 1158 to 63. And Liber Divinorum Operum, Book of Divine Works, also known as De Operatione Dei. Am I saying that right? Dei?
De Operatione Dei.
Dei?
Yeah, on God's activity.
Begun around 1163 or 64 and completed around 1172 or 74. In these volumes, the last of which, was completed when she was well into her 70s. Hildegard first describes each vision, whose details are often strange and enigmatic, and then interprets their theological contents in the words of the voice of the living light. With permission from Abbot Kuno of Disibodenberg, she began journaling visions she had, which is the basis for Scivias. Scivias is a contraction of
Si vias Domini, know the ways of the Lord.
And it was Hildegard's first major visionary work and one of the biggest milestones in her life. Perceiving a divine command to write down what you see and hear, Hildegard began to record and interpret her visionary experiences. In total, 26 visionary experiences were captured in this compilation. And she started to become healthier as she did this. So she seems to have realized later in her life, after this period, that was part of what was making her sick, was trying to suppress all of this. Scivias is structured into 3 parts of unequal length. The first part, 6 visions, chronicles the order of God's creation, the creation and fall of Adam and Eve, the structure of the universe described as the shape of an egg, the relationship between body and soul, God's relationship to his people through the synagogue, and the choirs of angels. The second part, 7 visions, describes the order of redemption, the coming of Christ the Redeemer, the Trinity, the Church as the bride of Christ and the mother of the faithful in baptism and confirmation, the orders of the Church, Christ's sacrifice on the cross, and the Eucharist, and the fight against the devil. The third part, 13 Visions, recapitulates the history of salvation told in the first two parts, symbolized as a building adorned with various allegorical figures and virtues. It concludes with the Symphony of Heaven, an early version of Hildegard's musical compositions. In early 1148, a commission was sent by the Pope to Bodenberg to find out more about Hildegard and her writings. The commission found that the visions were authentic and returned to the Pope with a portion of the Scivias. Portions of the uncompleted work were read aloud to Pope Eugenius III at the Synod of Trier in 1148, after which he sent Hildegard a letter with his blessing. This blessing was later construed as papal approval for all of Hildegard's wide-ranging theological activities. Towards the end of her life, Hildegard commissioned a richly decorated manuscript of Scivias, the Rupertsberg Codex. Although the original has been lost since its evacuation to Dresden for safekeeping in 1145, its images are preserved in a hand-painted facsimile from the 20s. In her second volume of visionary theology, Liber Vitae Meritorum, composed between 1158 and 1163, after she had moved her community of nuns into independence at the Rupertsberg in Bingen, Hildegard tackled the moral life in the form of dramatic confrontations between the virtues and the vices. She had already explored this area in her musical morality play, Ordo Virtutum, and the Book of the Rewards of Life takes up the play's characteristic themes. Each vice, although ultimately depicted as ugly and grotesque, nevertheless offers alluring, seductive speeches that attempt to entice the unwary soul into their clutches. Standing in humankind's defense, however, are the sober voices of the virtues, powerfully confronting every vicious deception. Among the work's innovations is one of the earliest descriptions of purgatory as the place where each soul would have to work off its debt after death before entering heaven. Hildegard's descriptions of the possible punishments there are often gruesome and grotesque, which emphasize the work's moral and pastoral purpose as a practical guide to the life of true penance and proper virtue. Hildegard's last and grandest visionary work, Liber Divinorum Operum, had its genesis in one of the few times she experienced something like an ecstatic loss of consciousness. As she described it in an autobiographical passage included in her Vita, sometime in about 1163, she received an extraordinary mystical vision in which was revealed the sparkling drops of sweet rain that she stated John the Evangelist experienced when he wrote, "In the beginning was the word," John 1:1. Hildegard perceived that this word was the key to the work of God, of which humankind is the pinnacle. The divine book of works, therefore, became in many ways an extended explication of the prologue to the Gospel of John. The 10 visions of this work, 3 parts, are cosmic in scale to illustrate various ways of understanding the relationship between God and his creation. Often that relationship is established by grand allegorical female figures representing divine love, caritas, or wisdom, sapientia.
Mhm.
The first vision opens the work with a salvo of poetic and visionary images swirling about to characterize God's dynamic activity within the scope of his work within the history of salvation. The remaining 3 visions of the first part introduce the image of a human being standing astride the spheres that make up the universe and detail the intricate relationships between the human as microcosm and the universe as macrocosm. They're really mandalas. This culminates in the final chapter of part 1, Vision 4, with Hildegard's commentary on the prologue to the Gospel of John, John 1 to 14. A direct rumination on the meaning of "in the beginning was the Word." The single vision that constitutes the whole of part 2 stretches that rumination back to the opening of Genesis and forms an extended commentary on the 7 days of the creation of the world, told in Genesis 1 to 2-3. This commentary interprets each day of creation in 3 ways: literal or cosmological, allegorical or ecclesiological, i.e. related to the church's history, and moral or tropological, that is, related to the soul's growth and virtue. Finally, the 5 visions of the third part take up again the building imagery of Scivias to describe the course of salvation history. The final vision, 3.5, contains Hildegard's longest and most detailed prophetic program of the life of the church, from her own days of womanish weakness to the coming and ultimate downfall of the Antichrist. Why don't you take over for a bit?
So now we're going to talk about her music. In addition to the Ordo Virtutum, 69 musical compositions, each with its own original poetic text, survive. At least 4 of their texts are known, but their musical notation has been lost. This is one of the largest repertoires among medieval composers. One of her better known works, Ordo Virtutum, Play of the Virtues, is a morality play. It's uncertain when some of Hildegard's compositions were composed, though the Ordo Virtutum is thought to have been composed as early as 1151. It's an independent Latin morality play with music, 82 songs. It does not supplement or pay homage to the mass or the office of a certain beast. It is, in fact, the earliest known surviving musical drama that is not attached to a liturgy. The Ordo Virtutum would have been performed within Hildegard's monastery by and for her select community of noble women and nuns. It was probably performed as a manifestation of the theology Hildegard delineated in Scivias. The play serves as an allegory of the Christian story of sin, confession, repentance, and forgiveness. Notably, it's the female virtues who restore the fallen to the community of the faithful, not the male patriarchs or prophets. This would have been a significant message to the nuns in Hildegard's convent. Scholars assert that the role of the devil would have been played by Volmar while Hildegard's nuns would have played the parts of anima, the human souls, and the virtues. The devil's part is entirely spoken or shouted with no musical setting. All other characters sing in monophonic plain chant. This includes patriarchs, prophets, a happy soul, an unhappy soul, and a penitent soul, along with 16 virtues, including mercy, innocence, chastity, obedience, hope, and faith.
We've listened to this.
Uh,
It's kind of intense. It's not like a really, to me, an enjoyable thing to just sit and listen to. It's not entertainment or just beautiful.
Yeah,
It's meant to be, affecting.
yeah. This is the cover of. This is recorded on YouTube. You can get this. So, in addition to the Ordo Virtutum, Hildegard composed many liturgical songs that are collected into a cycle called the Symphonia Harmonia Celestium Revelationem. The songs from the Symphonia are set to Hildegard's own text and range from antiphons, hymns, and sequences such as Columba Aspexit to responsoriis. Her music is monophonic, consisting of exactly one melodic line. Its style has been said to be characterized by soaring melodies that can push the boundaries of traditional Gregorian chant and stand outside the normal practices of monophonic monastic chant. Researchers are also exploring ways in which it may be viewed in comparison with their contemporaries, such as Hermanus Contractus. Everything, as you saw, there was nothing but women singers in the thing that we played, and all the music was designed for the nuns to be singing this. No men. So,
Well, there is some music that was written
Yeah.
for men, but
where
not this.
where you went by.
Did I?
Yeah. Hold on.
Sorry.
Here. Yeah, another feature of her music that both reflects the 12th century evolution of chant and pushes that evolution further is it's highly melismatic, often with recurrent melodic units. So you can see she's repeating themes again and again. Scholars such as Margot Fassler, Marianne Riekert-Fau, and Beverly Lohner also note the intimate relationship between music and text in Hildegard's compositions, whose rhetorical features are more often distinct than is common in 12th century chant. As with most medieval chant notation, Hildegard's music lacks any indication of tempo or rhythm. They're just literally horizontal bars done with a pen. So some are longer than others, and they're either above or below the ones that precede it and follow it. So there's no notion of counts or keys or anything that you could think of that has been captured in modern musical notation. The surviving manuscripts employ late German style, which uses very ornamental neumes, and the reverence for the Virgin Mary reflected in the music shows how deeply influenced and inspired Hildegard of Bingen and her community were by the Virgin Mary and the saints. Okay, you want to do this?
Okay.
This is, I think it's Science and Medicine, I think is what it is. And medical writing, scientific and medical writings.
Hildegard's medicinal and scientific writings, although thematically complementary to her ideas about nature expressed in her visionary works, are different in focus and scope. Neither claim to be rooted in her visionary experience. Rather, they spring from her experience leading the monastery's herbal garden and infirmary, as well as theoretical information she likely gained through her wide-ranging reading in the monastery's library. As she gained practical skills in diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment, she combined physical treatment of physical diseases with holistic methods centered on spiritual healing. She became well known for her healing powers, involved in the practical application of tinctures, herbs, and precious stones. She combined these elements with a theological notion ultimately derived from Genesis. All things put on earth are for the use of humans. In addition to her hands-on experience, she also gained medical knowledge, including elements of her humoral theory from traditional Latin texts. I thought we could go one at a time like that. Hildegard cataloged both her theory and practice in 2 works. The first, Physica, contains 9 books that describe the scientific and medicinal properties of various plants, stones, fish, reptiles, and animals. This document is also thought to contain the first recorded reference of the use of hops in beer as a preservative. The second, Causae Curae, or Curae, is an exploration of the human body, its connections to the rest of the natural world, and the causes and cures of various diseases. Hildegard documented various medicinal practices in these books, including the use of bleeding and home remedies for many common ailments. She also explains remedies for common agricultural injuries, such as burns, fractures, dislocations, and cuts. Hildegard may have used the books to teach assistants at the monastery. These books are historically significant because they show areas of medieval medicine that were not well documented because their practitioners, mainly women, rarely wrote in Latin. Her writings were commented on by Melanie Lipinska, a Polish scientist. In addition to its wealth of practical evidence, Causae et Curae is also noteworthy for its organizational scheme. This first part sets the work within the context of the creation of the cosmos and then humanity at its summit, and the constant interplay of the human person as microcosm, both physically and spiritually, with the macrocosm of the universe form all of Hildegard's approach. Her hallmark is to emphasize the vital connection between the green health of the natural world and the holistic health of the human person. Viriditas, or greening power, was thought to sustain human beings and could be manipulated by adjusting the balance of elements within a person. Thus, when she approached medicine as a type of gardening, it was not just as an analogy. Rather, Hildegard understood the plants and elements of the garden as direct counterparts to the humors and elements within the human body, whose imbalance led to illness and disease. She was obsessed with this idea of viriditas, which can be translated as greening, but it's like a spiritual kind of greening. It's a growth that, since I've been exposed to her work, I understand it in a different kind of way. It's it's like photosynthesis, but that's just like the physical aspect of it. What she's talking about is
she's trying to talk about Gaia, about the spirit of the earth and how it interacts with the sun, and all these plants that you see around you, end up making it possible for life, where the plants take in the carbon dioxide and they give off oxygen, which is how we live.
So the nearly 300 chapters of the second book of Causae et Curae explore the etiology or causes of disease. Excuse me, I'm getting winded speaking of sickness, as well as human sexuality, psychology, and physiology. In this section, she gives specific instructions for bleeding based on various factors, including gender, the phase of the moon. Bleeding is best done when the moon is waning. The place of disease, use veins near diseased organ or body part, or prevention, big veins in arms, and how much blood to take, described in imprecise measurements like the amount that a thirsty person can swallow in one gulp. She even includes bleeding instructions for animals to keep them healthy. In the third and fourth sections, Hildegard describes treatments for malignant and minor problems and diseases according to the humoral theory, again including information on animal health. The fifth section is about diagnosis and prognosis, which includes instructions to check the patient's blood, pulse, urine, and stool. Finally, the sixth section documents a lunar horoscope to provide an additional means of prognosis for both disease and other medical conditions, such as conception and the outcome of pregnancy. For example, she indicates that a waxing moon is good for human conception and is also good for sowing seeds for plants. Sowing seeds is the plant equivalent to conception. Elsewhere, Hildegard is even said to have stressed the value of boiling drinking water in an attempt to prevent infection. That was pretty sophisticated. You go ahead.
So as Hildegard elaborates the medical and scientific relationship between the human microcosm and the macrocosm of the universe, she often focuses on interrelated patterns of the four elements, fire, air, water, earth, the four seasons, the four humors, the four zones of the earth, the four major winds. Although she inherited the basic framework of humoral theory from ancient medicine, Hildegard's conception of the hierarchical interbalance of the four humors, blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, was unique based on their correspondence to superior and inferior elements. Blood and phlegm correspond to the celestial elements of fire and air, and the two biles correspond to the terrestrial elements of water and earth. Hildegard understood the disease-causing imbalance of these humors to result from the improper dominance of the subordinate humors. This disharmony reflects that introduced by Adam and Eve in the fall, which to Hildegard marked the indelible entrance of disease and humoral imbalance into humankind. It happens that certain men suffer diverse illnesses. This comes from the phlegm, which is superabundant with them. For if man had remained in paradise, he would not have had the phlegmata within his body, from which many evils proceed, but his flesh would have been whole and without dark humor. However, because he consented to evil and relinquished good, he was made into a likeness of earth, which produced good and useful herbs, as well as bad and useless ones, and which has in itself both good and evil moistures. From tasting evil, the blood of the sons of Adam turned into the poison of semen, out of which the sons of man are begotten, and therefore their flesh is ulcerated and permeable to disease. These sores and openings create a certain storm and smoky moisture in men, from which the phlegmata arise and coagulate, which then introduce diverse infirmities to the human body. All this arose from the first evil, which man began at the start, because if Adam had remained in paradise, he would have had the sweetest health, the best dwelling place, just as the strongest balsam emits the best odor. But on the contrary, man now has within himself poison, and phlegm, and diverse illnesses. So there you have it. Hildegard also invented an alternate alphabet, literae ignoti, or the alternate alphabet, which was another work, more or less a secret code, or even an intellectual code, much like a modern crossword puzzle today. Because yeah, they were all worried about people stealing their ideas or getting burned at the stake for whatever it is. So Hildegard's unknown language consisted of a series of invented words corresponded to an eclectic list of nouns. That list is approximately 1,000 nouns. There are no other parts of speech. So they're only nouns, there are no verbs, there are no adverbs. That's it. The two most important sources for the lingua ignota are Wiesbaden, Hessische Landesbibliothek, which is also called the Recent Codex, and the Berlin manuscript. In both manuscripts, medieval German and Latin glosses are written above Hildegard's invented words. So they are decoding this by doing this. The Berlin manuscript contains additional Latin and German glosses not found in the Recent Codex. The first two words of the lingua as copied in the Berlin manuscript are Eigons, which is German for Goth, Latin Deus, English God, Eigoth, and Elegans, German Engel, Latin Angelus, and English Angel. So there you go. Those are like useful words. You want to be able to say angel all the time.
It's on the tip of my tongue every day.
Maddox claims it's likely Hildegard learned simple Latin and the tenets of the Christian faith, but was not instructed in the 7 liberal arts, which formed the basis of all education for the learned classes in the Middle Ages. The trivium of grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric, plus the quadrivium of arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. The correspondence she kept with the outside world, both spiritual and social, transcended the cloister as a space of spiritual confinement, served to document Hildegard's grand style and strict formatting of medieval letter writing. Continuing to Christian European rhetorical traditions, Hildegard authorized herself as a theologian, through alternative rhetorical arts. Hildegard was creative in her interpretation of theology. She believed her monastery should exclude novices who were not from the nobility because she didn't want her community to be divided on the basis of social status. She also stated that woman may be made from man, but no man can be made without a woman. A lot of people have said that. She wasn't the first. Because of church initiation on public discursive rhetoric, the medieval rhetorical arts, including preaching, letter writing, poetry, and the encyclopedic tradition, Hildegard's participation in these arts speaks to her significance as a female rhetorician, transcending bans on women's social participation and interpretation of scripture. The acceptance of public preaching by a woman, even a well-connected abbess, an acknowledged prophet, does not fit the stereotype at this time. Her preaching was not limited to the monastery. She preached publicly in 1160 in Germany. She concluded 4 preaching tours throughout Germany, speaking to both clergy and laity in chapter houses and in public, mainly denouncing clerical corruption and calling for reform. Some things never change. So that's it. Now we just have a little snippet here on Mecklenburg of Magdeburg. She was well known because it says right here, she was one of the first mystics to write in Low German. Until this point in time, everything was written in Latin. There wasn't anything that was of significance. And Low German was definitely, as opposed to High German, Low German is kind of I don't know how to describe this. It's kind of like a Southern drawl. Okay, it's kind of, they slur a lot of things together, so that's why it's called Low German. The High German is very sharp and has edges to it. You hit certain syllables hard. Anyway, so Magdeburg of Meckelt, 1207 to maybe 1282 or 1294, was a Christian medieval mystic, and her book, Das fließende Licht der Gottheit, The Flowing Light of Divinity, is a compendium of visions, prayers, dialogues, and mystical accounts. So again, she had all these visions and she wrote them down, but she wrote them in Low German. The title of the book is in Low German, okay? Just to start with, it's not in Latin. She was born into a noble Saxon family. She had her first vision of the Holy Spirit at the age of 12. In 1230, she left home and renounced worldly honor and worldly riches to become a beguine at Magdeburg. A beguine is some sort of nun, isn't it? Yeah. There, like these others, she seemed to have exercised a position of authority in her community. In Magdeburg, she became acquainted with the Dominicans, became a Dominican tertiary, and it seems clear she read many of the Dominican writers, and it was her Dominican confessor, Henry of Heil, who encouraged and helped Magdeburg compose this flowing light, this book. One of the problems with the Dominicans is they led the charge with the Inquisition. They were the first to burn people at the stake, and they were proud of it. So you have to watch what you're doing messing with these Dominicans. Her criticism of church dignitaries and her claims to theological insight aroused so much opposition, some called for the burning of her writings, as they probably called for burning her too. With advancing age, she was only isolated, and not only isolated and the object of extensive criticism, but she also became blind. So around 1272, she joined a Cistercian nunnery at Helfta, which offered her protection and support in the final years of her life. Here she finished writing down the contents of the many divine revelations she says she experienced. It's unclear whether she actually formally joined the Cistercian community, whether she simply resided there and participated in religious service, without taking Cistercian monastic vows. And the nuns were highly educated, and important works of mysticism survive from Mecklenburg's younger contemporaries, Saint Mechthild of Hockeborn and Saint Gertrude the Great. So here you go. I guess there's one more. Her book was composed between 1250 and 1280, 3 stages in the evolution. First 5 books were finished around 1260. The next decade, she added a 6th book, and after going into the Cistercian nuns at Helfta, she added a 7th book, rather different in tone from the previous 6. It was originally written in Middle or Low German, the language of Northern Germany, and while her original composition is now lost, the text survives in 2 later versions. The Dominican friars of Halle, a community, translated the first 6 books into Latin, and in the mid-14th century, a secular priest, Henry of Nürtingen, translated the flowing light into Alemannic dialect of Middle High German, and this version survives complete in 1 manuscript and in fragmentary form in 3 others. So the sole surviving copy of the Flowing Light is located in this library in Switzerland and was rediscovered there in 1861. So it was put back in the shelves someplace and someone found it. So there you go.
What is a secular priest?
What is this?
What is a secular priest?
Who is the secular? The secular priest. Yeah, there's some priests. For example, you can get married. I think if you're a secular priest, I don't think you could get married if you're a priest. Okay.
Okay.
So you didn't take the vow of chastity. But here we have, Bruce, I don't know of anything like this in Buddhism where do they have mystics that have these visions and write things down? I'm sure they have visions.
Well, they have monks.
But the question is, do they ever write them down? And these visions are, apparently incredible.
Well, they do have where gurus have great insight into the nature of the mind. One of the unusual things about is that they have awareness and depth, understanding of their own mind and other people's minds. And it's one of the characteristics of the great gurus. So it's a lot to do with awareness of in the depths parts of reality and the mind, which
Right.
is, you know, which comes from a lot of meditating and a lot of realization that comes from that.
Right. Yeah, so I guess they would just choose to encourage you to learn how to meditate, and then you would understand what's going on rather than writing down what these visions are, whatever.
Yeah, like, you know, yeah. I mean, obviously these people had great realization from previous lives.
Sure.
I know in Buddhism you have a realization of a deeper level of reality in your own being. Like basically they say that you're born pure. You already have the nature of Buddhahood in your own mind.
Right.
And then you can attain it. Some people do, most people don't. But that's the overview. Very different from you know, the Christian, where you're kind of a born sinner, which is
Sure.
you know, a very negative view of the mind compared to
Yeah.
that you're a born you're like they say that all beings eventually will become Buddhas because of their own nature. That's what
By the way, I can't recall. Did we have it in this write-up? Apparently Dante read Hildegard's works, and that's where he got these ideas about heaven, purgatory, and hell, and what was going on. It
Right.
influenced him.
He was also influenced a lot by Islamic teachings. There was a lot of that in Florence at the time that he was writing.
Yeah,
And they had more to say, particularly about Paradisia.
yeah,
the traditional church teaching. So that's where a lot of that came from.
Yeah, the Islamic, you know, the libraries that were there and the people that they had discovered a lot of these works from like the Greeks and Egyptians and Hindus, and you know, Florence was this little podunk backwater. It just, you know, they ended up learning about this, saying, "My God, look what we missed," you know. So anyway, that's it for tonight. Have a wonderful
Have a good birthday party.
Yeah, birthday party, and we'll have American Thanksgiving here. Gobble gobble. So onward and upward. We'll catch you next week. Have a good.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Good week.
Bye.